Hello, friends. I am so excited to be one of the speakers at the International Self Care Summit. And I really just got to thank Mind Habit Heart for giving us the platform to talk about a topic that we all know that we need, but not necessarily easy to implement in our day to day consistently. So today I want to focus on what thriving with self-care really means. And I'm going to get to what real self-care means. But before I do that, I want to introduce myself. My name is Jeanne. I am the founder of Self-Care Journey Holistic Wellness. I'm also the creator of my self-care system, guiding do-it-all women how to get to the root of sabotage, restore balance, and how to build a strong mind, body, lifestyle so that they can reignite with their inner spark and reclaim their time, energy, and joy. I'm also a certified holistic health and wellness and life coach and a mind and body practitioner. I'm an international speaker and also an executive contributor for a online digital magazine in the mental health space. And, just a little bit more about myself. I'm, really passionate about self-care. I like to call myself every woman's self-care coach. I graduated from university with a specialist in marketing and communications. And I also use my hands to talk a lot. So hopefully that won't be too much of a distraction for you. I was actually in the corporate world for 15 plus years in mainly public affairs, risk management, marketing, communication before becoming a corporate escapee. Now, I am someone who has always been very passionate. Some will say even obsessed with, healthy living, fitness, personal development, mindset, and really building a thriving lifestyle for myself and my family. And I've been immersed in the fitness world since as young as 16, 17. I also worked at one of the largest gyms in Canada. I married a man that I like to believe I manifested, and together we have two very rambunctious monkeys who definitely keep us on our toes. And if you're wondering why I am so obsessed with self care, it's, because I grew up with a mom who really put herself at the bottom of the list after having children. She really made us the center of her universe, which, God bless her. She is amazing. But I really saw that it took a toll on her health, on her energy, on her sleep, on her self love, all of those things. And it really painted a different picture of what I thought a mom, would look like, someone who is completely selfless and would literally put themselves at the bottom of the list. But as I got older, I vowed to myself that no matter how busy I get and no matter, if I become a mom or not, I would always do the things to, prioritize myself or the things that made me happy, kept me strong, and also emotionally resilient. And it later did come in handy during a very, challenging time in my life. I really, really relied on self-care being something that really anchored me and helped me sort through my emotions and really was able to come out of a really difficult situation in the best way possible. So, today, like I didn't really understood it, but I understand now why that had to happen to me in order for me to be where I am right now. And I didn't find my true passion really until I would say the last few years that I did, like after having my son, my second. And I told myself that if I were to take time away from my children, it definitely had to be something that I am super passionate about and really compelled to do, which is exactly what happened. I was drawn to do what I'm doing right now, and I believe that is my calling to reach the women that I have reached and continue to reach and to make an impact and to serve and to help others feel good in their body and also their mind. And I think that, I've been coaching since I was, in probably high school. He would come to me and share what they're going through. So it definitely is no surprise that I am where I am right now. And I have spent the last decade even researching and reading all about personal development, and I've always been drawn to self-care. And so, that is what led me to get all my certifications, to really also really understand the brain, the mind, and how that works with our health. Because I think as we kind of go through life, we feel like health is just one thing, whether it's nutrition or fitness, but we don't often think about how much our mind plays into things. And so I hired mentors and surrounded myself with like minded individuals or inspiring people, and, to create that momentum. And today I am so fortunate to be doing what I love, empowering extremely busy women to prevent burnout, release weight naturally, and achieve total confidence in every aspect of their life by integrating my self care system. So, since becoming a mom, I found myself becoming a frequent speaker on guiding women, especially moms, to prioritize themselves with holistic self care practices without feeling of guilt, despite the many hats that, we all wear. So, what I want, from today's workshop is to really help you understand self care a little bit more, but from a different perspective, and to help you find ways to incorporate more of it. Now, an exercise I really want to start with you, and you can make a mental note in your mind, or you can write it down on a journal or notepad. But I want you to ask yourself, when was the last time that you did something for yourself? What did that look like? What did you do? How long did it take you to actually do that? Did you feel, any amount of guilt while doing it? How did it affect your day afterwards, after doing it? It's very much like making sure your battery is charged, and you will be prepared for more unpredictable chaos throughout your day once you do charge your batteries. And yes, it will take some time to practice to get used to regularly charging your own battery. But it is so important to make time for it. And I think that that is the one thing that we feel like we don't have time to do. And it's the first thing that probably falls off our list, but is actually the anchor and the foundation that we need in order to succeed and thrive in all areas of our life. So I want to ask you, what days or what hours are you able to protect in your day in order for you to prioritize self-care, right? It's a very important question because we don't really plan it. We kind of let the day go by without actually really scheduling it in for ourselves, where normally we would schedule it for everyone else, right? In terms of our kids' appointments, other people's agenda, or other people's meetings. But when it comes to our time alone, we tend to not give ourselves the time that we need to charge our batteries. So what I like to recommend is to, find time within your day. And for me, for example, it usually is the bookends of my day. So it is early in the morning before my family wakes up in the morning, or at the end of night where my family tends to, fall asleep a bit earlier. And that is when I protect that time and ensure that I am really putting in stuff that helps me move the needle or helps me recharge. Even this workshop that I'm putting together right now for the summit is also, at the bookends of my day, right? And I really had to schedule that in and make sure that I didn't have any other commitments or didn't do anything else. And that hour in the morning before bed or at night should really be protected. This is where we need to cultivate the selfish spirit, is what I like to call it, right? If it's not selfish, like let's just start there. But if it were to be selfish, let's start cultivating more of it. Okay. Because my experience in, the coaching world wasn't super obvious to me, right? I was conditioned to chase certain merits in my life and a level of practicality that didn't include a lot of risk. But because of what my parents taught me, what I was conditioned to do, what I was programmed to do, I was chasing the check marks and, really packing in my days with all these things, like trying to reach a destination, trying to do all the things that only led me to burnout. I didn't even realize I was burning out, right? It was like all this stress that was happening and the anxiety because I was chasing all these things that actually didn't really help me with charging my battery. It actually depleted it and did the opposite. So I thought I had to accomplish, you know, things that didn't matter in order to feel happy. I would rely on stuff like materialistic things, clothes and makeup and all those things I love. Don't get me wrong, right? But I was probably putting it higher on the pedestal than it should be, and not really prioritizing self care, and but really neglecting it in a way where I didn't really truly understand what it was. And to me, self care does have a couple of different meanings, and it does have kind of like the typical self care definition, which I'll get into. But I really thought it was a way of, taking care of myself by chasing all these things. But when I went through, one of my most challenging times in my life, um, I really, turned to self care, as I mentioned. And those are the things, real self care, like the habits that actually helped me charge my battery, where I had no choice but to surrender to the universe. That's when I was able to feel my emotions and understand what I was lacking and what I needed in order for me to bounce back and become more resilient, right? It's actually assessing that inner peace, that inner child, dealing with the trauma, dealing with the things that have happened in your past and being aware of it and understanding what is hidden underneath it. That's how you begin to build that emotional resilience and also begin to charge your battery, because these are things that were on empty, that were never filled to begin with. But constantly kind of, put it in a little bit, put it in a little bit, but it was never fully charged. And so you were never really optimally working at your best 100% self, right? And I didn't know that when I was younger. And it wasn't until years of research and reading and just throwing myself into personal development space that I realized, wow, I was doing self-care all wrong. And even what I thought was self-care was definitely not self-care at all. And it's really understanding that and making a self-care strategy that is the key, right? And to me, it sounds easy enough, maybe, right? You might be nodding your head and thinking, okay, yeah, I can do this. But to me, self-care really has, a definition has a couple of folds, right? First of all, it's the action you take to address your own experience, which lead you to optimize your health, your happiness, your heart. This includes not only being kind to yourself, but setting up boundaries to help replenish your tank, recharge your energy, and reset yourself. Okay? Let me know if you guys agree with this. Are you guys nodding and saying that on the other end of the screen? Yes, that's self-care to me. Or is it like, oh my gosh, I did not know self-care entailed so much. So what I really want to focus on is the word address, right? That is the key word. Meaning, if you identify that you're having a difficult time with something, you're able to address it. You're able to ask yourself, what is on the opposite end of the situation that I'm experiencing, right? If I'm not running at optimal battery, what on the other end am I missing? What would bring me back to a sense of wholeness and calmness? And this is what I like to term self-soothing, right? Or self-regulating. Exercising this muscle to be intuitive with yourself only brings you into alignment with who you actually are. And I want to really specify the part about who you actually are and creating that identity of who you want to be. It is so important to really come at it from, do you want to be a person who is calm, who, comes off more like cool as a cucumber, or, doesn't sweat the small stuff, doesn't easily get irritated, is more on the happier, optimistic side? That's the identity that you want to form. And, implementing self-care practices is the habits that you need to incorporate or adopt in order to be that person. So oftentimes we really focus on the outcome, we focus on the goals we want to achieve without really tying it to our values and also tying it back to our identity. So it's really, really pivotal as part of our self care strategy to really align ourselves with our goals and understand who we want to be as well. Now, I differentiate self care and self maintenance a little bit differently. And you'll probably hear a lot more about the self maintenance in the mainstream media. But self maintenance practice includes things like facials, mani pedis, doing your hair, things that maintain how you look. And where people often say, you know, there's never been a time where people say self-care without prefacing that it's not the facial and manicures and the pedis. And I cannot wait for the day where we can just say self-care without having to explain ourselves and say what type of self-care it is, right? Because to me, the way I look at self-care is it is preventative care, it is health care, it is what we need to adopt in order to, live out our best life day to day, just like you would brushing your teeth. It is as essential as that type of habit. For me, all the other stuff that I just mentioned in terms of the facials, the manis, all that stuff is what I like to call self-maintenance. Self-care, the real self-care is, not a way to just heal but it's also to address the way that you feel. And, although the things can feel great, I want to show you that real self-care can bring you to a space where you can thrive. And I learned that the best kind of self-care doesn't always look like what you see on, right-hand side, right? Like the more positive self-care. It's more important to make the small changes on a daily basis in terms of how you live your life. So to me, taking care of your mind and body, also known as self-care, is a very pivotal pillar and foundation to help you boost that self-confidence. And it's really the key to helping you establish a healthy and happy and a thriving you, right? Where you're confident, you can build those boundaries, and you can really fulfill your potential. And although I used to think that stuff was going to make me happy, I really realized that you could have the stuff in place. And everything that you think is a great foundation for a happy life, if you don't have a self-care strategy or you remove it, everything could come crashing down. If you think about it, taking care of your mind and body is essential for you to balance your life, your work, your personal life, your family. If you don't pour from a full cup, right, you're not going to be able to overflow to the people around you. If you're only operating at 60% battery, then guess how much you're going to be giving to other people in terms of your energy. So it takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of dedication to incorporate self-care. And I know it sounds easy enough, but it's not, right? That's why we're here. That's why this entire summit was created, because it really is so important, but not easy for us to implement. So I want you today, if anything, after this training, I want you to commit to self-care. Give yourself permission to cultivate that selfish spirit, right? This is one of the strongest ways that we can show commitment, is to sign a pledge. Okay. So if you're one of those people who feel like you also neglect self-care, I just want to remind you that there is no rule, okay, that you have to give up all of your time. Okay. Let's also release the all or nothing mentality. You can give some time, right, to yourself. You don't have to give all your time. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So just because you do end up taking time to charge yourself does not automatically make you a bad mom, a bad wife. We all have that natural tendency to feel guilty because we are so used to being the person who overgives. And we tend to have a habit of feeling off because it is not within our regular realm to constantly think about ourselves, right? So it's just human nature. It's, it's been dated back. So I get that. But today I want you to actually find a way to protect and nourish the me in yourself, in living your best life and being the best version of yourself. And it's all about claiming your time and energy, but some for yourself, right? Also, don't forget, have some for yourself. So there are several types of self-care. And, in this pyramid, there is no particular order, right? So the first I want to touch upon, because to me, self-care is all of these things. Self-care, again, is not just the self-maintenance, but it is part of your daily habits. It is part of your lifestyle, right? So the first one is physical care, which is really finding things that you enjoy, that you want to do, right? That helps you boost that, movement in your life, whether it be walking, whether it be yoga, Pilates, kickboxing, whatever that may be. It does not have to be a vigorous activity in order for you to incorporate physical self-care. There's also the psychological self-care, which is mostly what this training is on. And it's becoming more in tune with your emotions, being more aware, being more aligned, checking in with yourself, becoming more mindful of your triggers, your thinking patterns, and really finding ways to, as I mentioned earlier, self-soothe quicker. So some ideas may include journaling, meditating, really being creative and expressing yourself. Third is all about spiritual self-care, right? So it's finding ways to really nourish your soul. You're striving for inner peace and you're seeking to find purpose, meaning in your life. Some ideas include meditating, spending time in nature, going for a walk. Next, we have intellectual self-care, right? So this is just the type of self-care that includes doing something that you enjoy on a intellectual level that challenges your mind, such as learning a new skill, reading a book or attending a workshop, learning a new language, watching a documentary. And lastly, we have social self-care. So I know coming out of the pandemic, we probably feel very disconnected, or, we're just coming out of that. And we probably got an opportunity to really experience what it means to lose that connection with others outside of our household. And so is actually very important, and it is going to look different for introverts versus extroverts, right? The key is to find your comfort level when it comes to social connections, whether it be creating a Zoom meeting, right, and doing some sort of virtual get together, or actually meeting with someone for coffee. Whatever it may be aware of what you need so that you know what you need to fulfill on the other end of things. So I want to focus on psychological part of self-care, which is what, to me, what also true real self-care is, right? It helps us improve and preserve our mental and emotional health. It's going to encourage you to adjust your perspective inside and have the work that you need to do on a daily basis, right? It'll help you feel better, so you don't feel like you're needing to escape with some of the things that don't serve you. You're integrating self-care in your life so it doesn't feel like you're doing anything extra where you should feel guilty about. And the first thing I want to, really address is be yourself. Right? That's one of the things I think people, where there's a little bit of a disconnect, where we all, in a way, wear a mask, right? And I don't mean, the COVID mask. I mean, like, masking who we really are to the outside world. And this felt like, a huge lifestyle change to me, because I went from someone who had, some anxiety and stress, in a particular time of my life. But I spent several years just really hiding it, right? And I was really under this facade of a really put together, social, bubbly girl. But inside, I was dealing with something else. And when people asked me, I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to address it. I wanted to run away from it. So I used to associate those negative feelings with being weak and vulnerable, until I realized it was the actual complete opposite. Because until you address those times, you're not going to be able to fully understand who you are in order for you to align yourself with your values, right? Because that's all your habits and what you do every single day end up being who your identity is or who you want to be. So one day I just decided not to wear a mask anymore and allowed myself to be vulnerable and to feel my emotions so that I knew how to take the necessary steps afterwards, right? What can I learn from it? What can I do to improve it? And it was my decision to do something about these emotions and come at it from a non-judgmental perspective, but really understanding what the triggers are as well, so that we know how to prevent it or how to be more proactive. So it really helps to be self-aware, and it could really give you clarity on what those feelings are telling you. You can choose to find a way to express them that is outside of just, numbing it, which is sometimes what people end up doing. They don't really express it in a positive way. They end up maybe numbing it or using food as a distraction or alcohol as a coping mechanism. So another thing is there's a lot of outside noise, right? That's another thing about adopting a self-care strategy where you're more aware. It's important to understand what those external factors are, because we are constantly feeding our brain with stuff such as media, imaging, people's opinions, other, social programming from other people. And sometimes we end up falling into what I like to call the 3 ugly C's. That's complaining, comparing, and criticizing. Okay. For example, we are probably on social media more often through our work. And that's, my common input, whether you like it or not. Every time you go on social media, you are inputting and feeding your brain, and you're becoming more aware of it, of what you're feeding into it. And this is what you can do. You can, be more objective. Once you're aware of something, you can be more objective, and you can come at it from that perspective and not get distracted when you look at your feed. You can look at things on a different level, right? Everything that you look at social media, ask yourself whether it makes you feel safe, capable, and confident. And if you notice something that doesn't sit right with you, it's not an opportunity to judge someone or think badly. It's about figuring out what you want to achieve in your sense of self, or even in your life, and tailoring your inputs so that you support the ecosystem that you need, right? Observe that you're happy for them, and that on the other hand, you're working on something else so that you can drop the 3 ugly C's. Now, there's also more than just problems that deal with a challenging situation. Our caretaking system to understand and address our problems are very, very pivotal, because you're dealing with problems on a day-to-day basis, whether you know it or not. And your emotions as a result of these problems and if are what comes out of it, right? We attach a meaning or emotion to it. And if problems are left long enough, you end up with a particular belief system. And sometimes these beliefs could be very painful. And so, some examples would be, where you put problems to the side and you address these emotions. You can clear them up, right? You can clear up the stories that you tell yourself. And if you remove the story or that identity, the problem may be even easier to solve, right? But we need to be able to address those emotions and understand what those beliefs are in order for us to reframe the story that we tell ourselves. You'll begin to realize that you are very much in control of your mind. You realize that you have complete control over the situation, and that you can learn to be kind to yourself because it is the right thing to do. We often are overly critical of ourselves. And when we are not this, where we leave room for our inner villain, is like what I like to call it, to come in and talk ourselves out of something or into something. Some people may even eat their feelings. Like, I remember when I was younger, I would over-exercise and I threw myself into my work, and that eventually led me to burnout. So it's important to really know what those beliefs are so that you're able to address the emotions and the accompanying. There are 3 things that you always have control over, and it's so important to keep this in mind. You have control over the thoughts that you think, the images that you see, and the actions that you take. It's what makes us human. We're not animals driven by evolution or instinct, but when we're in control or when we're not in control, you're driven by instinct. And that is where problem it arises, right? Where we don't want it to be. And so every single time there's a story every single time there's an event, all events are actually neutral, right? It's the story that we tell ourselves or something that has happened where we attach an emotion and a strong belief. Maybe it's from a previous experience, previous conditioning or programming, which leads us to take action based on those beliefs. So it's important to really get to the root of what story are you telling yourself. What's fascinating is that we actually have 80,000 thoughts, right? About 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day, but only 2% of them are actually new thoughts. Right. And what's even more fascinating is 80% of those thoughts are negative, right? And 80% of those negative comments are on repeat. So we can create many thoughts each day, but some don't bother to intentionally change our thoughts. If your thoughts aren't serving you, then your behaviors are probably not either, and you are doing those on repeat. Nothing is changing. You're ending in a cycle. It doesn't stop. And if your efforts just are at a standstill, then and you're living on autopilot, then you may not realize, because you're not aware or addressing these emotions, that you're being steered by your thoughts, by your subconscious mind. So a quote that I really like to share, right, which is what I like to call a self-care reminder, is your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values become your destiny. So it's so important to value yourself. So when you are born, we see ourselves as a whole being. You intrinsically know you're worthy, you're loved, and purpose. But as you get older, you start to develop an ego and the idea of who you are. Instead of feeling, you start thinking. The world shows you what is acceptable, what is not. For example, a bad grade or a bad breakup. You carve out a little section of these deficiencies in yourself. No matter where you are in life or how you feel, you are still that person that you sense when you're a child, right? You are purely deserving of love. All my problems took a tone when I was, realized that I was already enough. Right. So step one is to develop self-compassion and be kind to yourself. Right. This is an area that I think that everyone needs more improve on, because we are very critical of ourselves and we give ourselves a very hard time. Step number two is to accept your worth and that you are enough. And step three is to move how you feel about yourself from between your ears to below your body. Getting into your body, feeling it through your workout, dancing with music, taking a bath, stepping into your own physical experience, moving into your body, right? You are not your problems, right? Feel it into your muscles, your toes, your smell, everything around you. Put distance between you and anxiety and reality you experience while you do this. Rather than trying not to do something, replace the negative self-talk or the inner villain with self-love, right? Self-care doesn't have to look a certain way. It just has to be effective. And for all the busybodies out there, or the women who are doing it all, or whatever stage that you're at, time is the one thing that often ends up being the clutch, where people feel like they don't have time and that's why they're not incorporating it in. And I understand, right? Even though self-care is so important, it is not top of mind. It is not easy to implement. A lot of us struggle with it, and that ends up being the bottom of our list, right? Which is why what I do and what we all do as self-care advocates, it's so important for us to continue to advocate for self-care. Right? Most people always will manage time to find things that are important to them, but in some cases they don't feel like they're important enough, or they don't feel like they are deserving enough to do things for themselves. And it's important to understand that self-care is something we should consider as a necessity, right? I mentioned before, it is not something that is the self-maintenance where, it's okay if I don't do this, but it's something that should be looked at what you would normally do, just like brushing your teeth, just like going to the washroom, like our day-to-day. Self-care is something that we need as basic care, right? Preventative care, health care, taking needs and tending to ourselves. It actually taps in, as you can see from this slide, into happy chemicals, the dopamine, where it's the reward chemical or finishing a task, celebrating a win, or indulging in something. Oxytocin, the love chemical you feel when you pet a dog, hold a baby, work on your passions. The serotonin has to do with your mood and can really help when you're meditating in nature or breathing. And lastly, my favorite is the endorphins, which include exercising, laughing, and watching something funny. Now, be clear, right, on ways that you can incorporate more self-care. Like, be clear on it. Ask yourself whether you really don't have time or you really don't have time. And I get my clients to really track where their time is going for them to understand whether they can really make some time. And if you need a little bit of help, here are some ways that you can fit it into your routine. First of all, ask yourself why you want to do it, right? How do you want to feel, and reverse engineer what you need to do daily to feel that way. Because it's good for me is not strong enough. You need a why that is greater than you. You could also get accountable, right? Be accountable to yourself, follow through on your own commitments, join a class, hire a coach or a mentor, set reminders or share with a friend or a significant other. You can also start scheduling it, right? I talked about how important it is to block the bookends of your day and to really calendar and schedule it in your daily activities, whether it be personal or professional. And don't cancel on yourself, right? You really, really implement it like a real appointment. And then lastly, it is to be present. Really focus 100% on where you are, what you're doing, because mindfulness is such a good practice that would really help you stay in the moment. So here is the future focus of self-care. Consider your future best self. Make a small change based on that consideration that will leave the future you really pleased and really taken care of, right? So before you quickly brush off self-care, ask yourself, what is an area of your life that you could do something for your future self, right? And maybe it helps you become more organized. So doing anything future-oriented gives you the tone of self-care, mothering energy, taking care of a version of yourself. Identify your own self-care. Right? For example, I know my future self will benefit from having more of a morning workout. I'll do a few things to prep myself so I can hop out off of my bed and integrate it, right? Put my gym clothes on or have it nearby, set up my area of my weights, have my water by my nightstand, really clear the path and create the path of least resistance. So it makes it easier for you. Put your energy into proactively supporting the version of yourself that you like to become. Don't fall into habits that feel good now, but bring you distress later. So taking a spin on things, I really wanted to address sometimes that self-care, I think I, shared with you that what real self-care is, but it's also good to understand the hard truths about self-care. There are some hard truths about it that you may encounter, right? First of all, you may disappoint some people when you finally decide to actually prioritize yourself. Or, self-care often means doing what you don't like doing in the present moment to benefit a future you, right? So it's not always something that you want to do, but you know that it is good for you. Third of all, your boundaries will scare some people away, right? If you're used to people pleasing and saying yes and bending over backwards for them, then as soon as you, start to actually, step back and say no, that's when people might get, a little bit of a shock that you did that and you might offend them. But it's important to understand that you don't owe anyone else your time. Okay. And then number 4 is to not neglect taking care of yourself. You don't owe anyone anything, like I said, right? And sometimes these boundaries that you set for yourself will repel other people. But it's okay, right? We need to release what doesn't serve us. And sometimes I think as humans, we tend to hold on to more than we should for longer than we should. Number 5 is neglecting yourself to take care of somebody else may seem like an act of love, right? But giving them from a place of emptiness only leads to resentment towards the other person and eventually towards yourself. 6 is self-care requires you to let go of relationships that don't serve you or habits and choices that no longer help you, no longer move you forward or help you charge your batteries. 7, it really means being honest with yourself. And when the truth is hard, to actually admit it, to face it, not run away from it, right? Address it. And lastly, self-care is hardest to do when you need it the most. One thing I was told that, in terms of meditating, for example, if you feel like you don't have time to meditate and that you don't want to meditate, you are likely the person that needs it the most. So same thing with self-care. If you don't feel like you have time for it and that you don't feel like you're important enough for it, then you probably need self-care more than you think, right? So here are some systems that I want to share with you for, starting to build this emotional home for yourself, this ecosystem, right? It starts with really creating that morning routine that I shared, right? So maybe in the morning, you could really start to build that muscle, that mental mindset muscle, right? Maybe you can journal some fear work, right? Some of the things that are in your mind that you're afraid of, that you really want to put on paper. You just let it all out, right? There's something about, again, writing it down where we can see it from an objective perspective. On the other side of things, having an attitude of gratitude, right? Having a gratitude journal, writing 3 things that you're very grateful about, either at the start of your day or at the end of the day. Those times before bed or when you wake up, your subconscious level is the most vulnerable to hearing your what you need to say to reprogram it. So if you exercise and do those affirmations and those visualizations in the morning, which is another thing that I want to share with you, your subconscious mind is more open to receiving those changes and those thoughts. So try that out, right? Try to do it in the morning or before bed, either the gratitude, the fear work, the affirmations, or even the exercise that I mentioned, to really create a full ecosystem of what you need. At the end of the day, at the end of this workshop, I want you to ask yourself, how do you want to be remembered as a daughter, a boss, a friend, a wife? What do you want the people who care about you to say about you, to feel about you? What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind, right? Who do you want to be? It always comes back to your identity. And self-care is just one of the habits to adopt, but it's such an important habit that we need to constantly ensure that we are really, really utilizing the real self-care. Okay, so not just the self-maintenance, but also taking advantage of also understanding where you need to address the emotions that are hidden beneath so that you can begin to really maximize the full benefits of self-care.